Paradox initially only allowed me to show you guys 30 minutes of footage when I was allowed to release my Byzantine campaign, but there was a lot more information in that video that I couldn't get through to you guys. It was basically 4 hours of information. I was explaining every single little frame in essence in detail, and I had to cut that out. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to play the video and I'm going to pause and explain every single piece of the screen in detail, explain why I'm doing what I'm doing, what would be the alternative. Plus at the end of the video, I'm going to go through the questions you guys asked in my previous video. And if you have any other questions, make sure you ask them in the comment section below here. I will do my best to answer your questions in the next video after this, which should be the army video. I'm still working on it. It's a little bit more difficult. There are a lot of unique units. I will make sure you see all of the unique units because there's a lot that you've not seen anywhere in the Tinto talk. Now, I want to mention here that you do have the option of naming them either Byzantines or Eastern Roman Empire from the game rules, not the settings. And I'm mentioning this because I've seen people asking this question, why some people have the nation called as Byzantines, why some people have it called as the Eastern Roman Empire. It's a setting that you can do, and it's also classified as a tier 4 nation, which means that you cannot form the Roman Empire because you are the Roman Empire as the Byzantine / Eastern Roman Empire. However, you can form other nations like Europa, which is a tier 5 nation. I'm gonna pause this a little bit here. So we have an image of the minor Beylik of the Saruhanids. You see here we have all the information about the Saruhanids. Some very important things about them are obviously the population, which in essence all population in the game is going to go down by half the moment that the plague strikes. You see the culture, you see the religion. Now we also see that they are a vassal, and that's also why I paused here, because they are at the start of the campaign a vassal of Gedmianids, and there is an event that allows them as well as their neighbors to the north and to the south, including the Karasids, to become free from the Gedmianids, which is basically free real estate for the Ottomans afterwards in the first few years of the campaign. So inflation in EU5 really determines a lot of things. Inflation is horrible. I personally believe it's the equivalent of both corruption and inflation as it is in EU4. There are ways of getting rid of it. The most easy way is of course not minting anything, and then if you don't mint, you get a reduction of 0.12 every month. That being said, my gripe with inflation is that Byzantium is the only nation that I've seen, maybe there's others but I haven't seen yet, that starts with inflation at the start of the campaign, and you don't really gain inflation during the campaign because obviously everyone's only going to be minting up to 0.12% of inflation, so you don't go over that threshold, and as consequence you don't gain any inflation. I would personally like to see some mechanics that also give inflation, some laws maybe that you enact that also give passive inflation, something that makes inflation a little bit more punishing in the game, because right now just getting inflation from this and maybe events, I haven't seen any, but there might be some events that give inflation too, is not enough. It's a very negative thing, and I like to see it affect your campaign a lot more than it already does, which is similar to what corruption plus inflation is in EU4. It's really dreadful. We also have 1,000 debt from day one, and we only have 8 ducats available to take as loan. Now this is a bit misleading, and I have to be honest with you guys here. Only the first month, I'm not sure if I mentioned that, but only the first month this is an issue. So you want to make sure the first month you have enough money to pay your debts, as in the 0.88 ducats or whatever you have to pay for the first month, so you don't go bankrupt because you don't have the estate's treasury up yet. After the first month, the estates start taking in a massive amount of money from the taxes, because you have very little that actually goes to the crown, and you're barely well, actually as the Byzantines, you're not taxing your estates at all at the beginning of the campaign. However, after the first month has passed, you will be able to take loans from the estate as long as the estates have loans, and you can use those loans to build up your economy and then eventually pay off the debt that you already have. So it's not as bad as it seems. And we also need to lower taxes for the clerics because we have no loyalty from them apparently. We cannot be minting because in order to lower the inflation, we have to not be minting anything. As most nations, you're minting to get a lot of money from your mints, but as the Byzantines, you cannot do that, unfortunately. We also need to max out our costs of the court and our stability because we start with So for the Byzantines, you really want to have cost of court and stability to max pretty much the whole campaign. In fact, you want to have both of these maxed out for the whole campaign as any country, because stability in particular affects everything. You need stability not only because it lowers the estate satisfaction equilibrium when it's negative and increases the rebel threshold, but it gives a lot of bonuses when it's positive. And you need stability to revoke privileges, you need stability to change laws, you need stability to embrace institutions. You need it for pretty much most of the interactions in the game. I said earlier in a previous video that stability is basically the new mana, and some people said that it's not the new mana, it's what stability is supposed to do. Yeah, I agree with you. That is exactly what stability is supposed to do, and that's exactly what mana was doing in the previous game, alongside a lot of other things that it was doing, which have been replaced by proper mechanics in this game now. Minus 11 ducats from day one. Pretty much everybody around you can absolutely wipe you out from the face of the planet. Again, this is a little bit misleading. That's true. Everyone around you can wipe you out off the face of the planet. However, there are a few ways you can circumvent that. As any nation, a little bit less as the Byzantines, but as most nations, you can start a defensive alliance. Defensive alliances are very easy to join right now, very easy to form, and if anything, you want to make sure that whatever nations you invite in a defensive alliance doesn't become a target of yours in the future, because they're still going to be in the defensive alliance and you're going to end up fighting a lot of nations. There's currently not much of a debuff to having a defensive alliance, which I feel like is a little bit lackluster. As the Byzantines, you can only invite at day one Serbia, Theodoro, and Trebizond, but you can also only ally these three nations as well, so you might as well just get the alliance, I guess, since they also join offensive wars as an ally. Plus, Serbia helps out massively. It does have a sizable army, and it does prevent the Ottomans from actually attacking you early in the campaign. There's also events. If you decide to be friendlier with the Ottomans, you can get a truce for 5 years with the Ottomans, but that does come at the cost. Right now, it's a lot better to just go for the right legislation, go for the right privileges to increase your levy size, as I do in the video in a few seconds, and then get a bigger levy than the Ottomans, which you can from day one. You can get up to 9,000 or 14,000, I don't remember, compared to the 4,000 you might normally start with, and then you can use that to win an easy war against the Ottomans early on before they get any actual sizable alliance sets. We'll get into that in a few seconds. Let's continue watching this. Day one. There's a few laws we can go for. First off, the levy age criteria determines how big our levy is going to be. As you would imagine, lower the estate means more equilibrium for the estate. The estates are really important in EU5 because everything you do revolves around the estates, so keeping them more loyal is very valuable. Now, that being said, I want to also point something out here. As the Byzantines, that is the case. You want to have the extra levy size by 5%, mostly because the other options lower your levy size, and you don't want to go for that. However, you also need a estate equilibrium, but it's a small price to pay for 5% levies, both for navy and army. Now, the reality is most nations, especially like Castile, France, England, they will not go, or at least they should not go for everyone. If anything, they should go for the 18 to 30, which lowers the levy size by 50%, because they do have sizable armies compared to their neighbors. I mean, maybe there's an exception to this between the English and the French, because they do start in the 100 Years' War, right? But as the Castilians, for example, you start with 57,000 levies, and if you lower that by 50%, that means you still start by, what, 30,000, almost 27,000 or whatever, which is a huge amount, way more than the Marinids, way more than Granada, anybody around them, and you're likely not gonna get involved in the French war anyway, so it doesn't make any difference there. Plus, that extra 5% loyalty equilibrium that you get is huge, because it means you can tax your estates 5% more, and 5% peasant and burgher tax is a lot of money, and especially as most of the bigger nations in Europe. So honestly, this particular law is huge. I also mentioned that early on in the campaign, for the first month, I don't know why, if this is intentional or not, actually I do know why, all of the laws that you take, all the cabinet members that you hire, are cheaper. That's because when we start the campaign as the Byzantines, our base tax is 30, but after we on pause for 1 month, our base tax goes up to 80, and I'm not sure if that's intentional or if it's a bug or if it's meant to be like that, I don't know. But after the second month is there, you cannot hire any more cabinet members, you cannot change any more laws for cheap, which is 3 ducats or something of the sorts in the first month. It goes up to like 30 ducats in the second month, so that's why I couldn't hire my cabinet members for a really long time, until I got the 30 ducats per cabinet member. Employment system, which will drift our value towards capital economy. Capital economy, in essence, pushes us away away from traditional economy. So here I'm going to back up a little bit. The option you go for is extremely important, like I said in the video, for more reason than what I just said. First off, capital economy is vital in the late game when production efficiency is really important. Production in the late game really scales up massively, especially with the trade nerf that we got, where you only get a percentage of trade, basically a percentage of the profit in relation to how much crown lands you have. So if you have 100 profit from trade and you have 30% crown lands, you only get 30 ducats because that's the amount of your profit. That's equivalent to the crown lands. That's after I made this video. Before, you used to get an insane amount of money from trade when I made this video. That's been changed since. That's why, in my opinion, production efficiency is literally the meta right now. The other option there, namely traditional economy, is okay early in the campaign, but honestly, you have so many different parliament issues that force you to go towards traditional economy, and even privileges that do that it's pointless going for that, since it's going to start slowly drifting towards the traditional economy from day one a lot. Third law we have to codify is the precious metal distribution. Like I said, we're not minting anyway, so that is the one for us. Take note, in most cases, when you start off, you want to go for the complete opposite. Byzantines are the only one where it's pretty much a must to go for that option. My new opinion about this is that every single body should go for unlimited export. Why? Because the trade advantage is huge. So the way the trade advantage works in EU5 is basically within a market, whoever has the highest trade advantage gets the first priority for receiving their goods. So if there's 100 lumber in the market and you need 100 lumber and you're the first in trade advantage, you're going to get all the wood. The guy that's second after you needs also 100 lumber, but there's only 100 in the market, he gets 0. That's how it works right now. And that trade advantage alone is the main reason you want to go for unlimited exports. Of course, the gold and silver output does make a bit of a difference too. And in most cases, income from minting is not that big of an issue early in the game. Income from minting does increase as you progress into the 1500s, so you get significantly more money from that later on. But I still think the trade advantage should be prioritized over everything else here. The easiest way for us to fix our economy is to go to the trading tab, and we have 3.35 starting trading capacity. What we do with that is we start manually setting up some trade routes, such as the one here where we sell dyes. We have currently in excess of dyes, and then we can also sell some gold over to Sevilla, to Barcelona, and so on. If we go back to balance, we are now making 21 ducats. Take note, you also have the option of automating everything. We have the automation button here. I personally prefer to not automate anything because I learned the game by not automating anything. However, if you do automate it, it does a pretty decent job. But in my opinion, when it comes to trade, it's better to just manually do it, especially at the start of the campaigns. The reason I also say that it's better to trade manually, at least for the first few years until you start getting a steady flow of finances, is because the AI is not bad when it comes to trading. I'm not dissing the AI here, but as a player, it's easier for you to prioritize the high profit trade routes, only leaving out the needs of the people behind, because nobody cares about that when you need to make money, because otherwise you go bankrupt, right? And when it comes to the AI part, I personally believe that AI comes in massive handy later in the campaign, where it allows you to focus on one part of the campaign, and then when you're ready to focus on another, you can automate the part where you were prioritizing before. Also, take note when it comes to fort and navy maintenance and all the other maintenance here, we have a little automation button. You see it right over here. This particular button allows you to have these sliders automatically changed by AI. That's not the case with stability, however, not the case with the cost of court and diplomatic spending. But in most cases, it actually is good putting like this, because even though you take the slider down to minimum for fort maintenance and navy maintenance, the AI will automatically put it back up to maximum whenever you are at war. And the same goes for the taxes here. The AI will try to keep it at 50% loyalty equilibrium for the estates if possible, so you don't start incurring penalties, so you don't need to check every 5 seconds to see if you can tax the estates more or less. So I actually really like the automation, the way they've set it up. I think it's really well done. And we're also going to assign our cabinet members. Now, you've probably seen a few of these interactions that you have with the cabinet, including the Unified Culture Group. So the Unified Culture Group group is doable later in the campaign. It merges all your culture group cultures into one major one. So say as the Germans, you can merge all the Brandenburgish, Markish, Bavarians, Rhenish, whatever, make them all German in essence, one major group. It does take a while. It takes 10 years to fully implement this, and it will occupy your cabinet member for 10 years as long as you're doing this. And we also have the ability to influence our values. We have the ability to increase development with our cabinet members. Integrating is akin to coring provinces as it is in EU4, and right now we have one province that has been 60% integrated, so it's going to be faster to finish this. And we also need to use one thing about integrating, it is akin to coring, and it also gives 20 control in provinces that are integrated. So you really want to integrate them because control, of course, determines a lot of things, how much manpower, how many levies, and so on you get, the speed of assimilation, the speed of conversion to your religion and your culture too. It's just some more interactions here. We can assign our cabinet member to crack down on rebels, basically make sure we don't have any rebellions or that they don't trigger anytime soon, or at least try to prevent them. Recovery effort we can use to increase the population growth. I have not actually used this because I didn't feel the need to use it in my campaigns, but as some of the smaller nations, maybe you could use this particular interaction. I just don't know if it's worth it. 0.1% population growth. It is a lot though, to be fair, because there's very few ways of actually getting population growth modifiers, and getting a steady one from your cabinet members is not the worst idea actually. Use the other cabinet seats to lower the war exhaustion. Right now it's lowering at 0.12. We want to speed that up a little bit, as well as we want to increase a little bit our country stabilization. That's a funny way of saying stabilization. Anyway, so you see that because we don't have any cabinet members, the efficiency of all of the cabinets doing their particular jobs is very low. 20%, 31%, 20%. So it's very slow accomplishing all of these tasks. If we assign a cabinet member, whatever level their particular ability is will influence this massively. And if you make one of your cabinet members head of cabinet, which you can do, again, it doubles down on the efficiency of that particular cabinet member. We also have here a modifier, cabinet efficiency, which is exactly what you expect it to be. And the middle button here allows you to hire new cabinet members if you don't have any that you can use, because there are some nations that maybe don't have as many available cabinet members as the Byzantines do at day one. Now I also see here some of the values. We see centralization, decentralization. Throughout the campaign, you really want to push for centralization from day one. In my opinion, there's no reason why you should go decentralization. I've even prioritized canceling all the privileges that give out decentralization, because there's a lot of privileges that most nations, well, the Byzantines at least start with, and a lot of other nations start with, that give decentralization, right? Why are we doing this? Well, first off, crown power plus 15% is huge. It means you get more money from trade as of now, because that influences trade, as we know. It costs less stability to revoke privileges. You get more cabinet efficiency. Distant cost to capital is huge as well, because it's lowered by 10%, and that's actually amazing, because it means you can have more control since you lower that particular penalty. Counter espionage is okay, don't really care about that too much. Now, decentralization does have the benefit of giving you more state satisfaction, which means you can tax perhaps the estates more if you have the ability to tax them, because you could have reached the max tax for each estate. That's a thing too. And it lowers the monthly rebel growth. There's a lot of ways of lowering the rebel growth, and honestly, you might as well just fight them, because most rebellions are not as insanely brutal as they would expect it. I mean, they are brutal in the sense that you do lose pops, you do lose control of those areas for a while, and you might even end up getting attacked by some of your neighbors if you're weak when you have a rebellion. The maximum war exhaustion is absolutely pointless. I have not reached, even in some of the bigger wars, the maximum war exhaustion. Again, that's just my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong. Now, there are a few ways in which you can increase your values. Like I said earlier, cabinet member would help a lot, but I like to keep my cabinet members for other things personally. Now, there's some things here you can actually see. The law, Byzantine law, is a literal law. Theme system is a reform. Manorial courts, market fairs, fortification licenses, embellishing great works of art are privileges, and you can tell that from the icon as well. The average control in your country makes a big difference too. Higher control makes you go towards centralization more, as well as the development makes you go towards centralization more. Spiritualist offers population conversion speed at the cost of population assimilation speed, whilst humanist offers the opposite. You have increased population assimilation speed, lowered conversion speed, and possible clerics in towns and cities for spiritual socialist. Some people have also said about this that why does humanist increase assimilation speed and not lower it? I actually like the way it is right now, because if you think about it, what is assimilation? It's not about whatever your skin color or your background is. You can be an Orthodox Romanian living in the UK and assimilate within that particular society, learn their ways, speak like them, etc., etc. So it has nothing to do with your religion, which is why the conversion speed is reduced for when you go towards humanist, and the assimilation speed is increased, because the way you define yourself has nothing to do, end of the day, with your ethnic makeup. It's more about how you identify yourself culture-wise, right? Culture is not DNA, boys. And to reinforce this, humanist also gives unrest reduction or tolerance of heathens and heretics +2, which makes it easier for you to have multiple different religions within your country, because primary culture helps with more easily integrating a province. If a province is not even a little bit your primary culture, you're going to struggle with that. The Byzantines also, so for that, doesn't have to be majority primary culture, it has to be a plurality. So what that means is the highest amount of pops within that province. If it is your culture, you will not get the penalties. And then it also matters the cultural influence that you have compared to whatever culture is in that particular province when you integrate it. Also start with some really bad privileges given out to their estates, such as the corruption of the nobility, corruption of the clericos, corruption of the burghers, and the corruption of the peasant. Here we start with 4 privileges that are negative. Actually, we start with more than 4, but these are the 4 main ones unique to the Byzantines. All of them do one thing: they lower the max taxation for your estates, which means basically until you get rid of these privileges, you will not be able to tax, for example, the burghers at all almost, and the dinatoi you're going to really struggle. I think you can get like 4 or 5% taxation maximum until you revoke the privilege for them. That being said, they are attuned to whatever that particular estate revolves around. So you notice here that the dinatoi, which is the nobles, have morale of armies reduction. That's pretty sad. But then again, the astoi, which is the burghers, have trade capacity reduced by 10%. So that directly affects your income. It's not an easy decision to make, especially since you need both income and morale of armies. And that's one of the things I actually really like about the Byzantines, that you actually can play this nation in different ways. You can focus more on your economy, more on your army, more on conquest as consequence, or just stay smaller, maybe get only the coastline of Anatolia back and parts of the Balkans and just become an economic hegemon. That's also doable because of your particular position in the world, right? And you're also noticing that a lot of our estates have a ton of privileges given out. The consequence of these privileges being given out is that these particular estates have higher power: 46% for the nobles, 19% for the clergy, and 7 and 4 for the other ones. That in essence means you have less crown power, which means you get less money from trade. You also get debuffs such as cabinet efficiencies reduced, as you saw earlier in the previous screen. So as you progress in the campaign, you want to give less and less privileges to the estates, but you don't want to completely cut out the estates. I like to prioritize getting rid of the privileges that offer 50% power to those particular estates, the privileges that offer decentralization, etc., etc. Get rid of those, right? Of course, the debuffs that the Byzantines start with as well. But you also want to prioritize giving privileges that give you some good bonuses, whilst at the same time not increasing the power of that particular state by too much, or balancing out that particular state compared to another one, which is also extremely powerful. We have here as well some of the buildings illustrated, such as the Spinner's Guild, Weaponsmith, Potter Guild, Tools Guild. Early in the campaign, Weaponsmith, Tools Guild, Papermaker Guild, and a few others are huge, at least in the Constantinople market, because there is a huge shortage of that. And as you progress, Spinner's Guild, Weapons Guild, all of these will always be in high demand because weapons are going to be needed. A lot of these goods are input goods for a lot of other buildings, for a lot of units in the case of Weaponsmith, right? And the way that I personally like to see the buildings in EU5 is I like to divide them into what exactly they do. There's money-making buildings, like the ones that you see here have the plus 2.29 ducats, whatever, given as an estimated profit once you build it, and that is different based on where you build it, as you would imagine. Then we also have buildings that affect your country. This includes buildings that increase control. So buildings that increase control are rural and urban cathedrals, temples, bridges. These are the early buildings and the easiest ones. Now, another thing that indirectly increases control is bailiffs, because they lower the proximity to capital, but these are actually kind of bait. You want to basically build bailiffs in fringe areas where it's not as easy to get roads established. It's not as easy to get other buildings that lower proximity to the capital. In my run here, I build bailiffs in every single province, because again, I am not claiming I know everything about the game, nor that I said that at any point anywhere on any Discord or any video. Building a single building for the start of the campaign, namely the marketplace. I still believe the marketplace is going to be the best way to recover economically as the Byzantines. Just spam a few marketplaces. The income we're going to get though is going to be significantly less, so it's going to be a lot more difficult to actually expand as consequence, which is a pretty good nerf in my opinion. Now, the color coding itself is based off of what type of population is required in that particular building. So we see white ones like university, hospitals, Orthodox monastery, mission. These are buildings that use clergy population. The yellow ones are buildings that use burgher population. The black ones are buildings that use labor population, and in most cases the black ones also offer you new RGOs. So say for example in your market or your region or whatever, you do not have horses, you can build a stud farm and you get horses in there. Just make sure you do have a demand for horses. In our case, we probably have an excess of horses. Blue one is like the embassy over here, the type of buildings that require nobles, and red one, like the ones atop the Theodosian walls and the sergeantry, are types of buildings that require soldiers. There's different amounts of pops for each building, and you can unlock a lot of new buildings as you progress in the campaign. Pretty much every age has some type of new building, and in some cases, especially for the production buildings, there's upgrades to the production building, so you can upgrade those buildings to a new type of building once you have done the advance in the next age. Some buildings require also special stuff in order to be built, like the Orthodox monastery requires religious influence in order to build it, and I believe the cardinal seat also requires religious influence in order to build it, as the Byzantines remember that we have minus 0.10 religious influence from the beginning because of the privilege we have given out to the cleros, so expect not to get any religious influence for the rest of the campaign. That's also why we have this little icon here, which requires that we change one of our laws for the religion. You cannot do anything about this because it requires 50 religious influence to change that law, and you will not have that for a very long time. Unless you're lucky, you get it from events, or you give some privileges out to get a religious influence, but I don't think it's worth it personally. Another thing I want to mention, especially about marketplaces, you can build only a few of them. This is based on a few things, such as the size of the city, so the population that you have in that city, as well as the type, well, not city, I should say location, because in cities you have 4 marketplaces because it is a city, and then that's increased based on the population, as I said, and other modifiers. And in a town, you can only have by default 1 marketplace. So this probably answers the question, why should you upgrade from town to city? That's why you can get more buildings in a city than you can in a town, whilst in a village you cannot get marketplaces at all. You can only build market towns, which actually take in peasants. So despite the fact that a market town only gives 0.25 trade capacity, it doesn't take up burghers, which are populations that need to be promoted in order to become burghers. So it might actually be more efficient building market towns if you have a really backward society with really bad promotion speed, because you have really bad stability like the Byzantines have most of the times in the first 100 years. And we see here actually what are the benefits for upgrading a location to a city. You get extra possible nobles, clerics, burghers, laborers, soldiers, as well as supported building levels plus 100. You get promotion speed increase in cities, control increase. So ideally you want to have like a core area where you upgrade everything to cities. Like say we could upgrade all the area around Constantinople to cities and just have most of our industry in that area, and have also a lot of rural areas, because if you don't have that, you might end up not being able to produce enough food and you might end up in starvation, which is the case, for example, in the Italian peninsula. There's way too many cities and towns right now, and there's a lot of starvation even before the plague because there's not enough food. That is being addressed though, so keep that in mind. The paradox will reduce a lot of towns and cities to settlements before the game is out, and also they will add more towns and cities in the eastern parts of Europe and other parts of the world where there is not enough of them. Now, one thing to note here, if you have a city or a town in a location and you're trying to integrate it, it will lower the speed of that integration by 50%. You can see right here, it is brutal. Imagine having to integrate only areas with cities and towns, like for example Central Holy Roman Empire after the first 100 years becomes literally only cities and towns. Or I just mentioned earlier the Italians. Right now the cost to found a town is 200 to 300, and then downgrading it is double the cost for some reason, whilst from a town to a city it costs basically 1,000, and downgrading costs half of that, more or less. There's a little bit of a wiggle space there, a few ducats extra or less. And you might be wondering, why exactly would you downgrade a city, or why would you upgrade it? Upgrade for obvious reasons I just mentioned, because you get a lot of benefits. You could also have a situation where you need to downgrade because you don't have enough food, but more than that, you could have a situation where your city got massively depopulated, and it's honestly just better to turn it into a town and focus on another location which has a significantly higher population. When it comes to cultures in Europa Universalis V, it really makes a massive difference what culture you have, what cultures you accept, you tolerate, or not accept, because cultures are in essence how you become a stronger nation in the game itself. There's 4 types of cultures. There's your primary culture, in our case that's the Greeks. We have tolerated cultures, and we have accepted cultures, as well as non-accepted cultures. The lower level is of course non-accepted cultures, and then you start leveling them up: tolerated, accepted, and primary. To make another culture your primary culture, you need to have an accepted culture that is a significant percentage of the country, and then you also need to make sure that your ruling class is of that particular culture. Easiest way to do that is just convert your province where the capital is. After a few years, hopefully, you will be able to switch to the new accepted culture as your new primary. Now, you probably noticed there are relations between cultures. This is very important actually, because the accepted cultures that you can have are limited based on the relations with that particular culture, as well as the size of that particular culture. So what does that mean? Say for example, I tolerate a Romanians. It only costs 0.25 to tolerate them, but it costs 0.75 to accept them. That's because there's roughly around 70,000 A Romanians in my particular campaign at the start, and I am neutral relations with them. If I had friendly relations, it would be cheaper to tolerate or to accept them, and if I had bad relations, it would be more expensive. Take note, you do need to have at least neutral relations with another culture on both sides. The assimilation rate is pretty straightforward. It means how fast you can assimilate all the cultures to another culture. It doesn't have to be a primary, because when you convert cultures, you can choose to what particular culture you can convert with your cabinet members. If you want to convert everything to a Romanian, you can do that if you wish to switch your whole country to that particular culture. Artists are what creates your works of art, and the works of art can improve your cultural influence, as well as can give you various bonuses depending on the work of art. Now, when it comes to diplomacy, at the start of the campaign, you have fairly straightforward friendly actions, hostile, covert, economy, access, and subject. Pretty copy pasted from EU4. There's no new stuff. There's nothing that you have in EU4 that you do not have in EU5 already. We have favor system, we have trust system. Some of them work a little bit different though, so keep that in mind. And there are some new interactions, as you probably already noticed. As the Byzantines, we have 3 alliance options: the Serbs, the Wallachians, and Theodoro, and we already are allied to the Trebizond. I believe we start allied to them from day 1 of the campaign. We see here also the reasons for accepting. As long as the reasons for accepting are higher than the reasons not to accept, they will accept your alliance. Basically the same like it is in EU4. Amongst this is the trust they have towards you, the opinion. If you have a common threat, in our case, of course, I would assume is the Ottomans, but it might actually be Hungary. I'm not sure who would be the common threat in this case. Also, your strength versus them plays into it, and having fewer alliances will encourage them to get more alliances. So this is kind of similar to the minus 20% reasons to accept from EU4 when you have too many diplo relations in essence. Rival wise, you can only have 4 rivals if you are an empire, and if you're a county, I think you can have 1, and then 2 and 3 and 4. Pretty much 4 ranks of the country, 4 different rivalries. If you do not select 4 rivals, you will get those debuffs: antagonism increase, counter espionage decrease, etc, etc. So you really want to get your rivals. Now, you're probably noticing we cannot get the Ottomans as a rival. That's because for some reason they don't qualify, but then we have some nations that are within our region that do qualify. I'm kind of assuming this is based on the region where your capital is. I might be wrong about that, because at no point during the campaign was I able to rival any of the Anatolian beyliks, but I was always able to ally Egypt, which is weird. So I'm not really 100% sure how this exactly is calculated. I mean, look at this. We can rival the English, the Castilians, Achaia, Candia, Athens, but we cannot rival the Ottomans. Like, what? At the start of the campaign, you basically don't have many research options. Highly recommend you go for the trade capacity, which is just flat out money, let's face it. And of course, afterwards, organized religions, you kind of just have to. We see here the place where legalism spawned, basically in Rome. Rome, feudalism spawned in Aachen, and meritocracy spawned in Kanbalik. We have not yet adopted the meritocracy. We see a little bit of a slider here. Essentially, when this reaches the top, it means it has spread to all of our provinces, making it cheaper to adopt. The average literacy of the country 15.3, and then the monthly research progress is based off of the average literacy. That's why for some nations that are theocracies, for example, and smaller in size, and which as consequence have higher literacy because there's a lot of clerics in those countries, they research things significantly faster than bigger nations like us. Right now there are 6 different trees, starting from the first one, Age of Traditions. A lot of the researches from Age of Traditions are already researched. We still have some that we can do, of course, here from Organized Religion, and once we unlock meritocracy, we will be able to research those particular advances too. We're not able at the start because Europeans do not start with meritocracy as an option since it's not embraced. We also see the amount of government reforms with each age available, the 3 places where the 3 institutions have spawned, the research is shown here, and then the market price from 10% to 300%. This will slowly increase with each age. Now every single age has unique advances. One of the highlights about EU5 is that you don't just stack up modifiers, you actually get new mechanics. And the last stage, for example, we see here, but I'm not sure if you can actually see it because it's really pixelated. We have the Napoleonic warfare, which is a technology that allows you to ignore zone of control. We have also sharpshooters illustrated here. Every single age has 2 types of infantry unit, more or less a frontline one and a backline one. Backline one would be the ones that's shooting, frontline one that's taking the brunt of the fight. We have 2 types of cavalry, light and heavy. We have artillery starting from the second age. We have supply carts, or whatever they're called, auxiliary units for every age. And in essence, as you progress through the ages, you unlock an upgrade for your units. Starting from the first stage, you have the size of these units at 100 set, then it's set to 200, 400, 800, 1,600, and 3,200. So in the last stage, the armies are 3,200 strong per regiment. If you want to research a technology that's at the bottom of the research tree, you can just click on it, and then afterwards it will queue up every single technology that is required to reach that particular technology. And the cost for embracing that institution will change. The less it's spread through your country, the more expensive it is. The more it's spread, the less expensive it is. And I'm talking both stability and money. And a lot of the times it's better to just research the vital institution. In the second age, that would be professional armies, and then you just start going for the advances from professional army. And once you are done with that, you can embrace Renaissance. You don't need to rush for Renaissance and spend extra stability for no reason, since you're not going to be researching those advances anyway for a while. Diplomats also are very different from Europa Universalis IV, depending on the country rank. Empire rank gives an extra 2 diplomats. Base value for every country is 2, and then you get a monthly change of diplomats. There's a lot of things that influence this. Your diplomatic spending, which is from the economy tab. Aristocracy helps out with this. Base value is 0.1. Then you have reductions if you have a spy network, if you're annexing country, if you're improving relations. It all costs monthly diplomats. The good part is that there's very early on buildings that help you get more monthly diplomats, like the Royal Gardens, which you can build pretty much from the beginning, but it's very expensive. It's like 750 ducats or something. Now, another cool thing with trade is that the amount of trade that you're doing influences how much money you're getting it, because it also influences how much is available, and as such, the cost of that particular good. Now, because we are trading right now 3.25 dies to the Alexandrian market, the profit that we're making from that trade is only 8.76. However, if we lower the amount of die that we trade over to that particular market, it increases the profit we're making to 18.84, because there is technically a shortage on that particular market. So you can use the excess trade capacity that you have then to trade other goods to other markets where you might make a profit, or if you just need a particular good, you could trade for that particular good if that's what you want as well. So here we're trading for fine cloth from Kaffa to Constantinople, and here's what I was talking about earlier. The base tax increased from like 30 or whatever it was before to 83 literally after unpausing. So I'm assuming it just doesn't calculate all the base tax. I don't really know. There's a lot of situations that you get, such such as the Turkish threat here as the Byzantines, which in return is a similar situation for the Ottomans, but it's a positive one for the Ottomans. Basically, they get to unify the Anatolian parts. For us, it's just a problem that we have to handle right now. It does give 20 stability reduction from day one, and it lowers the Turkish Sunni peasants' satisfaction that we have in Philadelphia. That would be the little town, or better yet, the little city that we have trapped amongst Beyliks into the south over there. You can probably see it. It's literally right over here. It is a very sad story, actually. Philadelphia was, in fact, the last Roman city to fall in Anatolia, even later than the coastline provinces fell. It fell in 1390, if I'm not mistaken, which is way later than you would expect it to, considering it's just surrounded by Turks. We also see here the three major Turkish beyliks: Karamanids, Eretnids, and Ottomans. So it's not necessary that you always see the Ottomans succeed in the struggle for Anatolia, but in most cases I did notice the Ottomans are the ones that managed to become the big dog in the region. The cool part about the Byzantines is that we do have some provinces on which we can get claims from the beginning of the campaign. You see here the little hashed out yellow provinces. These are provinces we actually can just get a flat out spy network, claim them for ourselves, and then we can attack these nations with that claim. The other exception to attacking early on, as pretty much anyone, is just getting the parliament to issue a insult casus belli, and then later you can unlock the Vods CB and a few other ones later in the campaign. But early on it's really tough to expand. So as the Eastern Romans, I have to say it's a godsend really that you have the ability to get the claims on the Anatolian coastline and on the southern tip here of Serbia and northern parts of Albania for that matter too. That's exactly why we are establishing a network in Karasids right now. And I also find it really funny that we start with literally just a single ship. It reminds me of Prussia's Victoria 3 Prussia, where you start with a single ship as the Prussians. It's just funny to me. Now, you're noticing here we have a lot of laws. There's different laws with different policies for each law. Some countries have unique policies. Some policies you might unlock later in the campaign, and they all give different bonuses. You see here the maritime law that we have currently: protect trade routes gives plus 2.5 burger estate satisfaction equilibrium, and trade range increase plus 10%, but there might be better ones. Problem is, changing any law takes up stability. There is an exception to this. Well, not an exception because it still takes up stability, but if you summon the parliament, you have the option of making it cheaper, changing some of these policies from the parliament interactions. Yeah, you said that right. There are 10% loans. That is the default for loans. It is absolutely brutal. And after just a couple of months, the estates have managed to accrue 176 ducats, which is really good, because we can take these ducats as loans from the estate and we can use them to build up our economy. Also, remember that for the estates, the reality is that this money doesn't actually go to waste, right? If they don't give this money out to us as loans, if we give them the right privileges, they might even be building with the money they have accrued buildings in the country. I'm talking about roads. There's actually a privilege you have to give to the burghers to build roads, but they might build the marketplaces, they might build whatever production buildings, and it's not limited to one estate. Multiple estates can be building at the same time for that matter. And as far as I know, there's no ownership system, so everything that gets built is state owned. So that's just free buildings right there you're getting from a rich estate. Now we see a couple of extra privileges here. I'm actually going to give out the militias of Agrokoi, which basically means we increase the levy combat efficiency and peasant levy size and give them weapons. There's other really good ones here and also really bad ones, like the raw material output reduction that only gives 5% estate satisfaction is just bait. It's actually bait. Then we have the production efficiency reduction privilege right above means of production, which also pushes us towards traditional economy. This is double bad. You don't want to give this out ever. Then the partial yield as well, peasant food consumption, but in exchange we lose out 10% of our RGO in rural. Yeah, I'm good with that, thanks. I feel like most of the peasant privileges are horrible. Now we see here that we can raise 13,000 levies. Now this is of course only populations that are primary culture or accepted culture. This does not include tolerated cultures or non-accepted cultures. That's why I say the more pops you have, the more stronger you're going to be. And I'm talking about accepted and primary cultures pops, of course. Also on the military screen, I want to point out that the amount of units that you have is limited. The regulars I'm talking about here. This is basically land force limit, okay? I know there's some debate over this on the forums. I'm just going to tell you straight. The biggest limiting factor is the population and the amount of accepted and primary culture pops that you have. So more accepted and primary culture, more regulars that you can recruit. There's also age. So as you advance in age, you can recruit more regulars. There's an age buff to it too. There's a few other things. It's not limited to that, of course. We also see over here 4 red thingalingadings. These are the combat abilities. So infantry combat ability, cavalry combat ability, artillery combat ability, and auxiliary combat ability. It's called power in EU5, not combat ability, because it's shorter and sweeter. It's basically the same thing. We have the army tradition, which has a decay just like it does in EU4. The army experience can actually give you army tradition if it is high enough. And how do you get army experience? You drill your soldiers. There's actually an advance that you get fairly early on. After, I think it's after professional army, if I'm not mistaken, and as in it's part of the professional army tree, and that advance allows you to just drill your soldiers, which in return means you can get them to 100 army experience. If you have a regular army, that's 100 army experience. That will give some, not much, but some army tradition. Main way to get army tradition, as always, is from fighting battles, and losing them apparently gives you more, just like in EU4. The discipline also is based off of the ratio of primary and accepted cultures, just so we're clear about that. If we have 100% primary and accepted cultures, I think there's a 5% discipline bonus, if I'm not mistaken. Might be wrong, but when I hovered over it, that's what it told me. So we're hovering here for a second over the satisfaction equilibrium of the peasantry. There's a base value for every country of 60%. That means if no other modifier is impacted, you're going to be able to tax them at least 10% and still be at 50%, so they're not disloyal. Now, there are other things here, as you can see. Taxes for commoners is one of them. That means we're taxing them by 7%, which lowers the estate satisfaction equilibrium. There's privileges, consolidated corruption and agricoi, of course, access to royal and ecclesiastic courts, militias that we just give out. Now, this here is the law we enacted at the start of the campaign where everybody has to serve. The common language in the court languages impacts this as well. The stability impacts this. The low legitimacy impacts this. Values such as decentralization, traditionalism, individualism also impacted. Corruption of the various estates also impacted. So if we manage to get rid of all 4 of those particular horrible privileges, it's going to be by default an extra 10% loyalty equilibrium. And favor the ruler is one of our laws again, which also we're getting some more trade capacity from other buildings such as the wharf and the market warehouse, as well as the market center by default gives us 2 trade capacity. And for us to integrate the province of Thessaly will take 22 years. Holy schnitzel, that is a lot of years. You see that is modified though. After we actually click on it, it says 1357. Why is that? It's because of the 20% cabinet efficiency. So what you see initially is without the cabinet efficiency bonus. So once we actually get a cabinet member, it's going to be even cheaper. So that's primarily because this particular area is predominantly Greek, but it does have quite a sizable population. So keep that in mind. 127,000 is nothing to scuff at. Calling the parliament is fairly straightforward. You have to call it in one of your towns or cities. In our case, we called it in Constantinople. Now there's different issues you can have it with the parliament, and you will get both a temporary bonus from those issues as well as a permanent one after you finish the issue itself, as well as there's as you can see a lot of different events as the Byzantines, such as the ability to reform one of our government reforms into a better one in exchange for some ducats in this particular case, or gold. This reform is going to give an extra 10% crown power and lower the estate power from cabinet position by 10%. Whenever you enact reforms, it's not instant. It does take a few years to implement them, and during that particular time you're not getting these bonuses. You're not getting the crown power, you're not getting the cabinet seats, so we lose 1 cabinet seat right after. So that means that we do lose 1 cabinet seat pretty much as soon as we have unpaused. You see it says until 1341 unpaused, and there you go, we only have 2 cabinet seats left now. The ability of a cabinet member is a massive game changer. We see here military ability gives a 43% bonus at 87. So if we have 100 military ability, we would increase our bonus by 50% in all 3 categories, and that applies for all of the abilities. Can't believe this man has actually 1 diplomatic ability. How are you 87 and 1 diplomatic? This person has done warfare his entire life. Upgrading RGOs is absolutely vital in this game, guys. Getting your gems, your gold mines, your medicaments, of course, upgraded makes such a difference, especially early on where your goods cost a lot. Specific goods cost a lot, like the gems and the gold. Medicaments doesn't cost too much, but once the age of tradition passes and we're in 1346, we have the plague. Everyone's going to need some medicaments, so we're just planning beforehand. We're also upgrading dyes because we're trading a considerable amount of dyes. Take note though, all of these RGO buildings require laborers, not peasants. So we see here that we only have 200 laborers available. Once this has been upgraded to level 3, 3, we will have these 200 laborers working in the level 3 dyes mine up until it fills up the dye mine. So more pops are going to keep on getting promoted to the laborer type from the peasant type until we fill up the dyes RGO. When it comes to certain buildings like the hospitals, scriptoriums, temples, universities, they take in significantly less pops. You're probably noticing here it's 100 for the hospital, 50 for temple, 50 universities, 150 scriptorium. That's because it's a level 3 scriptorium, so technically it's only 50 per level. Another important thing to take note of is that the clergy estate satisfaction also influences the amount of research progress that you get, as does the power of your liturgical language. So if you have a really powerful language like Latin is, for example, right? Because there's a lot of Latin languages that, well, I think all the Catholics have Latin as their liturgical language, right? So they should at least at the start they have until they become Protestant. So that's going to make Western Europe a little bit more tech savvy early in the campaign. Let's say gives them a little bit of a boost. Institution has appeared in Paris. Now slowly this institution will start spreading to the rest of the world, and I mean very slowly. We need to have it at least 20% in order to embrace it. Now I also want to mention a little bit about the Age of Renaissance. There are things that happen as you advance in ages, and some things that impact you sooner, others that impact you a little bit later. For example, with the Age of Renaissance, we get expected army size increase plus 100%. Expected army size is the army force limit. It's called expected army size. It is army force limit. There's literally no difference. Control impact on war score minus 20% is also pretty good, as well as the diplomatic capacity is increased by 25%, as is the cultural tradition. And as of now, there are 109 possible advances. The reason I say as of now is because you might get more or less advances on a variety of things. If you change your culture, different cultures might have different advances. If you change your tag, different countries might have different advances. If you change your religion, different religions might have different advances, and so on. Basically, it varies from nation to nation, from flavor to flavor, more or less. I also want to point out that I'm really happy to see that we have fully scripted sprites already. We have these are the Varangian guards. They're different from the other units that we have, so these are unique units from what I noticed. Slightly different versions, alterations, but you get the point. And there's one really cool feature, I don't know if anyone's mentioned this already, but it's called uniformization. Basically, the more drilled and disciplined an army is, the more the uniforms are going to basically look the same. This is more important later in the campaign. You'll see, like, instead of having a ragtag team of soldiers, you have everybody like in a proper line with the same clean uniforms, not dirty, not nothing of the sort. It's so good. I love that part, honestly. It makes the game a lot more interesting, at least for me it does. When it comes to warfare, very important to note, taking the capital of a province is how you basically take over the province, because after you've taken the province capital, you will slowly be getting control over the rest of the locations within that particular province. And yes, wars are significantly faster in EU5. I'm talking 1 to 2 years fast. Early on, I should probably mention that taking fortifications is absolutely brutal. You might take them easily if you just assault the fortification, but then you will lose a lot of soldiers, and if it is levies, then you permanently lose them. That means you don't get these guys back. There is an exception. Professional soldiers, they have their units taken from the manpower pool. The manpower pool is given out by buildings, armories, sergeantries, etc., etc. These guys are technically made out of thin air once they do become manpower, so keep that in mind, but the levies are going to impact your country massively. Also, whenever you do raise levies, we have certain debuffs like food production gets reduced by 20% and such. I love how we also have a proper breakdown of our top 5 cultures, religions, and such. We're pretty homogenous right now. I'd say having about 80% Greeks, that's pretty acceptable in my opinion. Also, from what I noticed, naval units are also fleshed out. They do have different sprites for different units. We have at the start only traditional galleys and hulks, which is the transport on the galley, but you unlock upgrades to these and you unlock light and heavy ships afterwards as you progress in the ages. From the Age of Discovery onwards, especially from the Age of Discovery onwards, you will need light ships and heavies, especially if you're in the Western European parts. You know what I'm saying. Going into the colonies will be a lot easier that way. As it stands right now, this might be changed. After you've conquered a province, you will get a little bit higher control in that province, but eventually will start ticking towards 0 unless you have a core on that province, right? So in our case here, Argyreia, we have 0 control. We have nothing that increases our control. So eventually from 86, it will go down to 0 at a change of 0.5 per month. Having high control means that we can actually assign a cabinet member to convert this province to our culture, because as you see here, the pop assimilation speed is reduced by only 13% because of the 86% control. If it was 0% control, we would have a massive 100% assimilation assimilation speed reduction. So we would barely convert anything then, or better yet, assimilate anything then. And also as a whole, around our country, we have 0 to 10 on average control in most provinces here. As we progress and we get more buildings and we fully integrate all of these areas, we increase the control steadily. 1344, and we have a massive shortage of 1090 food. This is brutal. We do have a stockpile of food, so it doesn't impact us until the stockpile is completely depleted. The second that the stockpile is depleted, it will start killing our population because we just don't have enough food. Easiest way to do that, start upgrading RGOs, especially livestock and wheat and rice. Wheat livestock is +8 food per RGO level, and I think rice is 10 if I'm not mistaken, is the best one in the game if I'm not wrong. Whilst other stuff like fiber crops and such and wild game, they're really bad. It's like 3 food per RGO level, which is not great, but sometimes better that than nothing, right? Similarly here, very high control in the Ottoman and the Saruhanid provinces that we've taken. Again, taking advantage of that, as you would imagine, to assimilate and to integrate quickly if we can. One thing to note here is that you're not actually supposed to wipe out the Ottomans so fast. So this has been changed since the video has been done. You cannot do that anymore. You're able to maybe take half of the provinces tops now in a war against the Ottomans. I'm saying this because I know some people are worried about the game being too blobby. Trust me, it is not too blobby. And also here, the parliament issue integration policy is huge. The Black Death, I've said it before, I'll say it again, pretty straightforward. Starts in 1346 around the Golden Horde, unless you change this from the game rules. You have the option of having it start at a random date, not in 1346. And once it starts, you will lose about half your population roughly. You can mitigate that by isolating the country, and then also you can get some bonuses to disease resistance or plague resistance that will help you with not having that many pops die. I personally like to isolate the country. You have the option of not isolating, just letting it happen, right? Idea is you're gonna have to go through this regardless, right? And the end result is after you lose roughly half of your population, it stops in 1362, by the way. When that happens, your population will have some disease resistance to the plague. There's multiple diseases in the game, and if your pop already has a disease resistance to a specific disease, less population will die when you get that particular disease again in the future. We also have here move court into hiding option. I swear every single playthrough I did, none of my court, like the important guys like the king and such, died. I don't know how it happened for other people, but for me at least never happened, or I just never noticed at least maybe. Segregate the infected is also huge because it means you get the 15% resistance to the plague. Expel the sick will allow you to build the pest houses, whilst procure remedies is the middle ground, let's say, where you make money off of the plague by making medicaments more expensive, and you get some stability from it too. Some of the new diplomatic interactions are offering of sound toll, which will give a nation an exemption from paying the taxes when they have trades through our waters. We also have exclusive trade rights that we can request, and we ourselves can request sound toll exemption if we're trading through another market's waters. Plus, we can block other nations from building in our country. Why use that there? Because there are certain buildings you can build in other countries. There are some requirements for that, though. It could be relations, it could be something of the sorts. Keep that in mind. My favorite one is access options. So with access options, you can ask for a nation to give you food access, which means if your armies are going through that particular nation, you can just resupply your soldiers from that nation's food supply. So you could say attack Ming as the Byzantines. You get a couple of nations on the way towards Ming to give you food access so you can resupply your units there. Make sure you have enough auxiliary units on the armies as well to get some stocks of food with it. Then you can end up reaching Ming without dying off to attrition because you don't have food in your armies, and then have them come back as well. You also can enforce food access through a peace treaty as well. Whereas for subjects, there are a lot of options, as you can see illustrated here. A lot of them basically one-on-one taken from Europa Universalis IV. As you progress in the campaign, your control will increase due to buildings. As I said earlier, this is what it looks like right now. The average for provinces is around 40 to 45 in most of our lands, with a few exceptions where we have non-accepted cultures primarily, and the provinces also are not integrated, meaning they're not cored yet. Also probably noticing we have the Timurids over here. Timur will start blobbing like crazy. I've seen Timurids take over even the Golden Horde a few times, or the Great Horde. And there's also a fall of the Timurids. When they fall, there's an event for that, and I'm assuming some flavor for that as well. I haven't actually played as them. I've just seen it happen in my games. Usually that happens around 1460, 1470. All the provinces we have right now with the orange color are provinces that have roads in them, and we're also building quite a few extra RGO upgrades upgrade, as well as rural cathedrals, namely these buildings here, which increase control by 5% each. Take note also, stationing an army in a province increases control a little bit too based on the size of the army. And overall, I have to say that by the 1420s, 1430s, I was able to convert about 15% of the Anatolian lands that I took early in the campaign to Greek, as well as some areas that are Bulgarian around the Balkan parts. So I didn't convert that much. I've seen some people saying in the comment section that you converted a lot. That's not true. I probably converted, so I've got 4 million population. I probably converted 700,000 pops to Greek overall since 1350 onwards. So it's not that much. It's really not that much. You got to remember that the game is only 500 years, right? So you would not be able to convert everything that easily. You would have to really just have, because I had like 3 of my cabinet members assigned to converting all increasing control pretty much all the time. And the reality is that the areas that don't have the control, they're not integrated, they're pretty much useless. You're not getting much out of those provinces anyway. It's not much of a point to really own them until you've invested your cabinet members to fully integrate them into your society and take advantage of those lands, basically. Especially from accepted culture point of view or primary culture point of view, right? If they're not either of those, it's not much you can do with those pops. Now, going on to the comment section of the original Byzantine video, we're going to read some of these and answer some of these questions. And again, ask your questions in the comment section of this video. I'll be more than happy to answer whatever questions you might have for me, as long as I know. I love to see some actual stagnation and corruption system in EU5. In history, nations often stagnated or fell behind after reaching a certain threshold because their structures, which once made them powerful, became a burden over time as new inventions and changes came along. I would love to see this also. I can't think of anything of the sort. I actually would like to see corruption at one point make its comeback in EU5. I don't know if that's possible at this point though, because we already have so many other mechanics, but maybe we can have another place we can attach another icon for corruption. I don't know. Or maybe even make various mechanics give debuffs, right? Like lower stability, like passive lowering of stability from certain mechanics, for example. That would be a thing, right? Stability is insanely important, so lowering stability by default would be a big deal. I'm not going to go over the UI. We already know about the UI, and trust me, the feedback has been relayed. They are very aware of the development team. Hard pass for me will be a nightmare in to play an MP. I actually disagree with that, to be honest, because I feel like there's so many things you can do for a multiplayer that it would make the game a lot more fun. You genuinely have a lot more interactions between countries, and how you handle your trade situation comparatively to other nations within your trade market or within a neighboring trade market really is going to be very important, as well as you could do some shenanigans with food, you could do shenanigans with blockading, embargoing, etc. So it's going to be a fun game to play in MP, in my opinion. Now guys, I do want to take this moment to say thank you for watching my videos. I really appreciate all the support. Love you all, and I'll see you in the next one.